Hello, my fair citizens. Strider here with another full-length torturous set review. I wouldn't dog you like that. Come on. All right, so I will never do a full-length set review ever, period. Nobody cares. Nobody wants it. It's lazy fucking content. The only thing I'll ever do here is the top 10 cards I'm excited to brew around, as well as what I am looking at initially. So what this list is going to be, it's just going to be a quick top 10 that goes around the cards that I saw that I think are cool, and then my initial thought as far as what I'm going to build a deck around with first. So I hope you enjoy the janky ideas, but let me know exactly what ideas you have in the comments section below. Starting off at number 10, we have Grizzled Huntmaster. This is a 3-mana 4/3. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you may exile a creature card from your hand. If you do, search your library hand, which I don't know, you search your hand. Search your hand and library for any number of cards with the same exact name, exile them, then shuffle. Choose a creature card you own from outside the game. Conjure a duplicate of that card into your hand for each card exiled from your hand this way. So this is really interesting in a couple different ways. So you either need a bunch of the same creature in your hand for this to be really effective, or the other things that you can do is you can run cards like Karn the Great Creator and use artifact creatures. So Karn the Great Creator, you can also get artifacts from outside the game, which includes exile, which is exactly what this card does as well. You're able to go outside of the game or in exile to retrieve an artifact creature, exactly the same way you would do this. So you're exiling a card from your hand to making a copy of it, and then you're also able to get it back from Karn. There's a lot of really weird, wonky things you can do with this. I don't know how efficient or inefficient it is because it sounds really inefficient as far as trying to get some advantage, but it's possible that it could do something really cool. So I'm very interested to try it. I just am not super optimistic about it, if that makes sense. All right. Number 9, we have the new Gitrog. Super excited about it. I like Gitrog. Unfortunately, he's just a little bit too slow most of the time. But this Gitrog is a 4-mana 6/6 with Menace instead of Death Touch. At the beginning of each combat, so this includes your opponents, if Gitrog is untapped, any opponent, so in Brawl, or I guess not Brawl, Commander, if any opponent sacrifices a creature, tap a Gitrog. Then seek a land card and put it into the battlefield tap. Whenever a land enters the battlefield under your control, it perpetually gains black and green, tap, sacrifice this land, draw a card. Now, obviously, this isn't great, but a 4 mana for a 6/6 with Menace is a bit ridiculous. However, if we pair this with the other Gitrog, the 6 mana 6/6 Death Touch, I believe, the great part about that is anytime a land goes into the graveyard from anywhere, you draw a card. So you can pay 2 mana, tap, sacrifice it to technically draw 2 cards instead of 1. Later on in the game, this gets absolutely ridiculous. It's going to spiral out of control. There's so many things. I think this is a really good support of the other Gitrog. And so I'm really interested to see if people start running both of these together, in which case, I don't know, we may have some good Gitrog decks. I don't know. We'll find out. Yeah, it's interesting. Coming in at number 8, we have Assemble from Parts. Now, this is definitely not a normal Strider card, I know, but it's a 1-mana instant to where target creature card in your graveyard perpetually gains 4 mana, exile this card from your graveyard, shuffle it into your library, create a token that's a copy of it, except it's a 4/4 black zombie in addition to other types, activate only as a sorcery. Now, all we really need to do is play this with Underrealm Lich, and we're essentially unstoppable. There's no way you can permanently kill Underrealm Lich. The fact that we're able to get something like Gaia's Blessing and completely just shuffle our graveyard back into our library all the time, I think this is going to be an absolutely ridiculous card. Maybe I'm just overhype on Underrealm Lich right now. I just think there's so many supporting cards for that, as well as things like Muldrotha. I don't know. I just feel like there's so much power there that's just left untapped, and this is really just kind of focusing in on that. I'm really interested to see how we can abuse it. However, obviously people are going to be using it more for like Olimog. It's definitely possible there's going to be a copious amount of graveyard hate with this set. Let's find out. Now, coming in at number 7, we have 2 cards. So we're going to start off with Captain Ebonheart, which is just a 2-mana 1/1 with double strike, which is pretty good. Spells cast from among cards you drew this turn. Any card you drew this turn costs 1 colorless less to cast. And it's just this turn, so it's even things that you drew on the opponent's turn. So keep that in mind. And then it also has spells cast from amongst cards your opponents drew this turn cost 1 more to cast. So that is also very, very cool. Just in general, if they are on top deck mode, so you can do this with discard decks. If they're on top deck mode, every single thing they draw is going to cost 1 more. Now, Angel of Eternal Dawn is a 3-mana 2/4 flying. When it enters the battlefield, it becomes day and can never become night, which is big sad because I love the dark, right? Your opponents can't cast spells with mana value greater than the number of turns they have begun. So this is actually really, really good for early game tax decks. Prevents them from really doing any type of ramp. So it kind of just cucks all green decks, which is very nice. It's just you also have to be able to finish them off before they can do anything later on in the game, or you have to blow up a bunch of their lands. So this is a great tempo play for early game. You just have to be able to take care of them later on in the game. So it really just depends if we want to go the creature route and just tax them to death with like Talia and all that other nonsense. But obviously with Captain Ebonheart, we don't really have to do that. We'll just throw down Captain Ebonheart. We'll put down like Esper Sentinel. We'll do this. Those will be the creatures we use, maybe some Raiden. But then obviously we'll just blow up all their lands with Fall of the Thran or something, right? So that's the best case scenario. Coming in at number 6 on the list is Geist of Regret. This is going to be a 5-mana 4/5 spirit with flying, obviously. When it enters the battlefield, put a random instant from your library into your graveyard. Then put a random sorcery card from your library into your graveyard. Whenever you cast an instant or sorcery spell from your graveyard, copy that spell. You may choose new targets for the copy. This is absolutely ridiculous. So what I really, really want to do is I want to pair this with things like Jaya Ballard, which would be weird, but seems like it would be fun. You can also use it with cards like Increasing Vengeance, Finale of Promise, Every Flame Painter. I mean, there's a whole lot of things that you can do with this, but essentially what we want to do is we want to get some spells in the graveyard, and then obviously we want to be able to cast them and copy them. This doesn't work with Mizzix Mastery, unfortunately, but there's a lot of other cool things that we can do with it. Number 5 on the list is going to be Oglor, Devoted Assistant. Now, Oglor is a 2-mana 1/1 legendary homunculus. At the beginning of your upkeep, you look at the top 2 cards of your library, then put one of them into your graveyard. Whenever a creature card is put into your graveyard from your library or hand, it perpetually gains when this card leaves the graveyard. Create a tap 2/2 black zombie creature token. Now, I am 100% going to be playing this with things like Muldrotha and Underrealm Lich. So Muldrotha will allow us to play all of our cards from the graveyard. Underrealm Lich will get the creatures and everything into the graveyard selectively by putting the cards that we want in our hand and the cards we want in the graveyard in the graveyard. So this will be a really, really interesting deck to see if we can make it work. But since we're forced to go into blue, we're also able to play Tamiyo, which is an amazing planeswalker and also feeds the graveyard. It does all sorts of things that we exactly need for this card to be optimal. So the 4th set of cards, yes, set, so it's going to be 2 of them, that I'm most excited for is going to be Gutmorn, Packbound Servant, and Clone Crafter. So Gutmorn is a 3-mana 1/3 demon flying death touch, legendary, important to note. When it enters the battlefield, each player discards a non-land card. Simple enough. Whenever a player discards a card during your turn, they choose another player. That player conjures a duplicate of that card into their hand. It perpetually gains. You may spend mana as though it were mana of any color to cast this spell. So obviously when you do this, you want to make sure that you either discard a land or you have no cards in your hand when you actually play this. Because if you do, the opponent gets a copy of that card that's in your hand or whatever you end up discarding. Same thing goes, you don't want to use Liliana because Liliana will force you to discard cards as well as them. So you want to make sure you just don't have anything in your hand ever. So that's very important to know. However, if you can always make them discard a card on your turn, turn, this could be absolutely ridiculous. The only problem with that is that later on they know exactly what's going on, so they're just going to dump their hand out completely, so they'll never have anything to discard. Or you'll just already have discarded everything in their hand and they only have maybe one card and they're going to end up playing the land or doing whatever, so you just don't get a copy out of it. So in those cases, we got to find a way to like force them to draw a card or something. But since we're messing with the opponent's cards so much and making copies of it for ourselves, so obviously we have to pair this with Clone Crafter, which is a 2-mana 1/2. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you conjure a duplicate of a random creature card from your opponent's library into your hand. It perpetually gains. You may spend mana, as though it were mana of any color, to cast a spell. This is really cool because you really get to take advantage of whatever the opponent has. Hopefully, it's not just a Lawanor Elf, but hopefully it's also nothing. Best case scenario, it's something like a Dream Trawler or a Coma, something of that nature. Now, this is just something to really do once Gutmorn just kind of loses its effectiveness. But after that, we have to go even deeper. We have things like Gonti, we have things like Siphon Insight, you find some prisoners, pretty much anything that we can do to keep casting stuff that's in their deck. These are really just additional tools to make the opponent really mad. Because, obviously, when you're casting the opponent's cards, it feels really bad. But when you're just making like copies of their cards, it probably doesn't feel as bad. I don't know because it hasn't happened to me yet. I haven't really done it to anybody because it's kind of a new mechanic. But if you're actually taking their cards out of their library and casting it, they hate it so much. So let's just combine the two and see what happens, right? And the third card I'm most excited for is Key to the Archive. Now, I know this is a very unconventional card to be excited for, I guess. It's just a 4-mana mana rock, right? So this is a 4-mana mana rock that does come to play tapped, which sucks. You do get to tap it, add 2 mana in any combination of colors, though, which is very, very interesting to note because I don't believe any other mana rock does that in MTG Arena currently anyway, especially for 4 mana. So that's very, very good. But when it enters the battlefield, you get to draft a key from the spell book and discard a card. So this is fantastic because when we get to draft a card, there's a bunch of different cards we could choose from. The only one we actually care about is going to be Approach of the Second Sun. So once we throw this with Approach of the Second Sun, that means that we can also have, just naturally, 4 Approach of the Second Suns. So in theory, if we end up blinking this card, we can get more and more and more Approach of the Second Suns, get more of a chance to actually cast it from our hand, especially if you end up drafting it. You're just making a copy of the card in your hand. So it's not a token copy, it's an actual copy of the card. So if you cast it for the first time, it will go 7th from the top of your library. I think this is going to be absolutely ridiculous, especially if you're already running 4 Approach of the Second Suns in your deck. I think there's quite a few ways to abuse this, and the fact that it's also a 2-mana mana rock on top of that, or 4-mana, 2-mana mana rock, you know what I mean? The fact that it ramps you just that much closer to your Approach of the Second Sun, because Approach of the Second Sun is what, 7 mana? So you have 4 on the battlefield, you throw in this, and that's 2 more, and then you, as long as you hit a land drop, that's 7. So you get to play Approach of the Second Sun that next turn after you cast this, and then if you have another Approach of the Second Sun, you get to cast it again. Like, there's so many easy ways to win with this card. Well, okay, there's one easy way to win with this card, but the fact that this gives you the Approach of the Second Sun, I think is very important to note. That's extremely good. So I don't know, this, I can't really say that I'm super excited to brew around this card because I think there's only one real application, and that's what that is. But I'm excited to try it out to see how consistent it is, if that makes any sense. And coming in at number 2 is going to be Discover the Formula and Geist Channeler. Now, Geist Channeler is a 1/3 human wizard. Whenever it enters the battlefield, you choose an instant or sorcery card in your hand with a mana value 3 or greater, and then it perpetually gains. This spell costs 2 colorless less. Now, there's many different ways that we can abuse this, but for the most part, we're going to obviously want to target things like Rubble Reading or Smashing Success or Rubble Reading or something like that. You know, any type of land destruction card that we potentially have in our hand, that's what we're going to target with. So the next card that's also going to be paired with this is Discover the Formula. Now, obviously with Geist Channeler, we can make this 2 colorless cheaper, which is exactly what we need, because this is a naturally 6 mana instant, which is a bit too expensive for what it does, but it's still very good regardless. So what you're going to do is you're going to seek 3 non-land cards, then non-land cards in your hand perpetually gain this spell costs 1 colorless less to cast. Now this is specifically just non-lands, so there's a couple things that we can do with this. We can either go the enchantment route and do it that way, which is obviously a possibility. You can go Super Friends with this, but for the most part, I really want to pair it with the Geist Channeler, and that obviously allows us to do a lot of land destruction stuff. But that only works with instants and sorceries, and that's also why it's really good with this card. And the card that I'm most excited for, obviously, is Townraiser Tyrant. Now this is a 4 mana dragon that's a 4/4 with flying, obviously because it's a dragon. Whenever it enters the battlefield, target land you don't control loses all abilities except mana abilities and gains. At the beginning of your upkeep, this permanent deals 2 damage to you unless you sacrifice it. So it's essentially land destruction. Obviously, we're going to pair this with cards like Teleportation Circle or Ephemerate, essentially trying to get this on as many lands as possible to either force them to take a ton of damage or force them to sacrifice all their lands. This would be ideal. Obviously, doing something with Lithoform Engine would be nice. Copying the creature with, you know, the millions of creatures, spells you can copy, whatever it is. There's so many ways that we can abuse this mechanic, but I think the first and probably most consistent one that I'm going to try out is going to be the Teleportation Circle and Ephemerate. And I'll probably throw in Lithoform Engine just because.
Thank you all so much for watching. If you made it to this point, it means you either really enjoyed the video or you fell asleep and I'm waking you up now. Either way, thank you for all the support. I really do appreciate it. If you want to see more videos like this, hit that subscribe button, hit the bell notification, come out with videos 7 days a week.